I know this is cliche to say, but I almost didn't make this. I adore this series, but so many people have covered it so well, I thought I shouldn't make one because it's not anything new that I'm offering. Especially when Wendigoon's one came out, that's like the best one. And I just looked at it and went, no way, I can't make something as good as that. I probably don't have anything interesting to say anyway. But at the end of the day, we're here because I find it fun to talk about. I love this series. It's not often I talk about something that I actually really like. Even if it'll never be as good as the other videos I like on the subject, whatever. Monument Mythos is a sort of alternate history, parallel universe sort of thing where technology is slower, historical figures are wildly different. Oh, and there's literal monsters everywhere. Just a small thing though. We're going to go through all of it chronologically, and this is from the playlists, and as we go I'll try and explain as much of the story as I could possibly do so. It gives me some structure, but I am a rambler, so that's not gonna last for long. So we're gonna start with Season 1, Episode 1. Liberty Lurker. This episode concerns the making of the Statue of Liberty itself, with the audio being in Italian, very muffled, which is accurate to the kind of time period that they're trying to portray, but also adds a kind of eerie tone to it, because after all, this is analog horror. In 1889, the architect discusses how the platform for the statue had to keep getting bigger and bigger during the construction because President Grant himself said so. It's actually pretty weird to hear that, especially when you consider the platform is a part of the design aesthetic. A good foundation keeps the statue sturdy and gives it a powerful, timeless look, and you need that especially when it's a monument. Designing the platform specifically as bigger feels like it's gonna be off somehow, and makes you think it's to hide something, because any maintenance for the statue itself would be incorporated into the design already, so there must be something else for the extra space. In 1949, there are even more changes, and we can now see that these are formally classified documents. There's been a huge gap of over 30 years of declassification and engines for movement, and there's a movement axle and a drain? Waste management? Inside a monument? What's in there? Shrek? 2 Shreks? In 1954, we get another perspective, an immigrant who speaks of a terrible stench like a slaughterhouse, and something that's so strong and overpowering for her just smells it as if it's in the ship with her. She also says after they would go into the pedestal, the officers would leave and nothing else would happen. So as far as she could see, people being let in there at night didn't come out. In August 1985, something is spotted. So let's just have a crack at what we saw. Firstly, we now know what the axle is for, and why the pedestal has to be so big, because the small portion of whatever we see there is huge. You have to wonder how large the group of people being let in there was, because as the follow-up text says, there was a mass grave when the waste section was inspected. So there's a few questions to chew on. How many people in the government know of what's in here? Because there were officials leading people inside. Did they know, or were they just following orders? Because as far as we know, they don't go in there until there's an inspection, so how far does it go, and how many of these places are there? Episode 2, Rushmore Revenge. On August 7th, 2003, Mount Rushmore is vandalized. The vandals say that the government is funding mass murder. That's just governments for you. I mean, this is very strange. Then again, we did see what happened in episode 1, so the seeds are already planted for us to buy into some weird government conspiracy that the vandal is hinting at. Also, thanks to the graffiti, we now know that 2,600 landmarks have murders going on in them, and we can assume something fucky is going on like whatever was inside the Liberty statue. They also say, the blood of liberty will be avenged, the souls of Lincoln shall be freed, so we know there's something going on with Lincoln as well. On August 14th we get, I will introduce infection next week, Monday to Sunday, 12:10 to 13. Watch the symptoms. During this minute-long period, commencing on the 18th, there are now watchmen placed with cameras to try and catch anyone doing any funny business. On Monday, we get random lights. On Tuesday, we get more random lights. Wednesday, what is this 180p bullshit on my screen? Thursday, 4 Shreks. Friday, the figure is slightly less blurry, and Saturday, the intern forgot to remove the lens cap, but there's some ominous noises nonetheless. Sunday, however, we get this. There's some weird spikes or disco worms and a very not friendly noise to accompany it. I mean, this is a very quick shot, but enough to capture the fear that we've kind of had building up inside us throughout this entire thing, and not exactly be a jump scare. It's very well put into the series, and you'll find a lot of that stuff throughout. There's one in particular that I'll only mention very, very close to the end of season 2 that I was watching at night when I was making notes for these, and it legitimately just scared me. The final piece of information that we get is that the entire place smells of baby powder because that's what they put on the heads of the monument to counter the spikes, for whatever that does. It seems to be some sort of measure that they do against what was in each of these monuments, so we don't know what it is exactly or why. Episode 3, Alcatraz Attack. This one shows us a feed of Alcatraz from far away. The caption says 2 days before therapy and shows us ruins and something that looks oddly organic, like a giant cell or a piece of flesh. But we don't see it for long, it gets cut off. Day 1 before therapy, there's an overview of cell reproduction, which is strange because it's like the island itself is doing this. Why is an island with a building going through replication like this? Why is Alcatraz so organic? Why is so-called therapy involved? When the therapy begins, we get kind of a confirmation of this. It's radiation therapy, and it is predicted to rotate and head to the mainland and take over in an infection. West Texas has already been taken over, so it's accelerating past what it was predicted for the next 100 years. The next video is Dean Democracy. This is where the crazy shit starts, if you can believe it. So what we're looking at is the 37th president, and it's not Nixon, because this is an alt history. The clue's in the title. The news anchor calls it the greatest gift to the American people and hyped it up to the extent that 60 million people tuned in. Remember those TV days? Garbage. But people were so scared that this would be some war announcement or code word that they started panicking.
What are we waiting for? Let's bring them back home.
However, when they did tune in, it was just a bunch of images and one line.
What are we waiting for? Let's bring them back home.
People went from panicking to dancing in the streets and crying of happiness because everyone loves James Dean so much. Remember that. They all love James Dean. There's also a group called the Anti-Dean Association who says that he's the devil himself, an actual form of Satan who's brainwashing the people through technology and speeches and all that. They also cut down the power lines in the south so no one there can see the broadcast, which makes me feel like it's something about the broadcast that somehow makes people act this way, and not just the people liking Dean so much. There's gotta be something weird going on here.
James Dean is no man.
He went to the places afflicted and started repairing the power lines himself, which seems awfully strange to just manage to do it to such an extent, and from that won 70% of the vote, which is completely bullshit. The fact that the ADA is so ineffectual that they make Dean more popular, I'm gonna bring this up now, but you'll understand why I'm bringing it up later on. I think that there's two types of ADA. There's the actual ADA, and then there's the one that is like a false flag type of operation. It's controlled opposition, where people think that it's the terrorists, but it's something that will just make Dean look better in the end. Not just Dean, everyone that is in his league. You know how Dean is famous for rebel without a cause? These guys said rebel with sin, which is one of the dumbest taglines, and what a waste of a pun. It makes me irrationally angry. Rebel without a god is a way catchier name. I will do your propaganda for you. Hire me. Give me job. He does his speech by giving a bunch of other diverse figures a bunch of time to speak instead of him, and then plays the funky bongos afterwards. 1969, April 20th, the audio cuts out on his speech, and everyone says that he's so hot and they're so thirsty for him that he probably said some good stuff anyway and they're supporting it. Conspiracy time. What if the audio cutting out was on purpose as a test for how brainwashed the people are? Everything I don't like is controlled opposition. Stanley Kubrick also said it was the greatest film of all time, so he's in on it too. The next episode is Air Force One Angel. On August 17, 2003, Air Force One made an unannounced and unapproved trip across the continental United States. Many civilians claim to have seen the aircraft drop packages on various national monuments, the Golden Gate Bridge, Rushmore, and the Statue of Liberty. This is on the same day as the Rushmore incident before. The plane lands and something is spotted. White House officials later disclosed that the unusual flight of the Air Force One was unauthorized and unmanned. The lone figure seen inside the plane, dubbed the Air Force One Angel, has yet to be identified by federal authorities. That's another thing for your notes. There was no sign of a break-in, but the entrance was warped by a great heat, but the lock itself was not broken. Write that down. The next episode is called Lincoln Looker, and one of my personal favorites. The character of this one is Maya Arnoldson. Remember the name Arnoldson. She is a former Lincoln Looker. What is that? And why was she doing this for 2 weeks? Well, she was taken and put into a weird suit that smelled really bad, and the metal seat was very cold. It was a familiar face, she says. Every few nights, someone would stick straws in and feed her a weird soup. She was then taken out after they found out that they apparently got the wrong Maya Arnoldson, and President Reagan apologized and offered monetary compensation.
After 2 weeks, they found out that they had misidentified me and I wasn't the correct Lincoln Looker. Reagan apologized to me personally, and I was released with some monetary compensation. They don't care if I talk about it or not. No one would take me seriously. Lincoln looking is just too absurd.
The mask is Lincoln. Leonard W. Moreland, who you should also remember, is a former senior advisor and adds to this mystery with his own experience. Every president must appoint someone as the looker, and must hold that person as a looker for their entire time in office. That's just the way that the tradition works. Due to rumors that the Lincoln lookers were imprisoned behind presidential portraits, White House officials publicly removed and reinstalled the portraits to demonstrate that no space existed to hold Lincoln lookers. So they're not behind the paintings, and that makes sense to me because the eyes would not be big enough for those straws, I reckon. The statues, however. A Howard Melrose then contacts a Eunice about visiting the Lincoln Memorial, about what he saw. He was on the steps when he noticed that there was a scratching seemingly coming from inside the marble. A lot of people started noticing this as well and panicking about someone being stuck inside. But the scratching grew so loud, he thought it couldn't possibly be human. People were in a frenzy as it started cracking from their efforts as well. And when the head was moved, in a familiar pulley motion, something pokes out. Is this the souls of Lincoln? Moreover, is the weird soup doing something to make the lookers turn into whatever that thing was? The next episode is Washington Wormhole. This is the first introduction to what is called the special tree. The tree, according to this poem, could not be cut down and felt so lonely that it sang to break a man's lungs, whatever that means. So according to this timeline we're given, 1840 is when we get the first picture of it being isolated as the poem said. 1848, the Washington Monument seems to be something that encases the tree, as if they're trying to keep it inside it and build around it. From 61 to 85, the Civil War breaks out and they can't do the construction anymore. A lot of prisoners also get led inside and don't come out. The war would also possibly stop most people from noticing this, I think. In 88, construction is also completed and we get the monument as it is today. In 1910, there's an ad saying, "Visit the monument and listen closely. Hear the music within its walls," which also connects back to the music that the tree sang to break a man's lungs, which is very ominous if people are promoting going to listen to it. In 1910 to 71, 20 individuals disappear while visiting the monument. They're called the Washington Absentees, and they spent 7 decades missing. In 72, a classified film called Washington Standard Operation is leaked. It shows a familiar type of operation to the other monuments we saw, where there's an axle in place to swing a hinge and people are let in and don't come out. However, this time we get more information. It shows them being taken to the top, sound waves doing something to them, and them being dropped from the bottom. Notice the way that they're left to lie on the floor afterwards. Even as someone else comes in, that person is still left there, they're not cleaned up or anything. In 2000, we get "The Infection is Nigh, the music of Washington shall end," from the same person who did the graffiti before, and this was 3 years before Rushmore and The Angel. On the year of The Angel, there's a video of something poking out of the monument before this happens. All 19 Washington absentees are found unconscious at the base of the monument. The 20th absentee has been identified. So remember for your notes, because of course you're keeping them, the 20th and how they were all at the base of the monument like the other victims. The special tree has similar features to the things that we've also seen poking out of the other monuments. The next episode is Delaware Double. The Delaware River Journal gives us a story about the discovery of Ralph Grassaman and Michael Tillin on 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. They were finishing up their fishing when they saw something sticking out of the snow. It looked like a bicon, one of those hats from way back when, said Grassaman. So they realize that there's a person in there and it's a frozen guy. But they thaw him in the bathtub. And he wakes up. Oh mate, I found this bloke in the snow, eh? Dumbass gone and fallen asleep, eh? Oh yeah, just stick him in the bathtub, he'll be right. No worries.
Oh, my pucks.
So the man says victory or death and falls asleep. They take him to the hospital to realize that he's the George Washington. They theorize that he fell in all those decades ago and was preserved. And they tell President Dean and he's like, holy shit, that's fucking weird.
Oh, my puxo.
Now, while this is happening, there are some other videos going on. Let's talk about Corner Folk. Episode 1 of Corner Folk begins with a caption explaining a Riley Tillin uploaded 4 videos of a presence in his home, with the last one launching an investigation. The first video shows an explanation of how the planes of reality work according to him, with corners forming that people cannot pass through. The corner folk are people who pass through these because they have the power to go easily from one place to the next. He also shows that the corners can line up with houses and walls, like in his own situation. He also shows a video of the corner folk crossing. There's some familiar lightning as this weird kind of dopey looking being flies by at incredible speed. The camera also reacts to it as they pass. He says it takes a lot of energy to pass, hence the flashes and the little pink blob going by. In the second section, he shows that the folks rest in the corners of his house as if they're dreaming and huddled together. He assumed that they'd zap themselves between places because they can't keep themselves in these places, but it seems that they're just comfortably going as slow as they please. Imagines the world that they live in being these crazy looking sharp corner collages that rotate into planets, and says that the smaller ones are nurseries because these rapid rotations of all these angles keep the babies in the same spot so that they don't wander off and get hurt, and this is shown from the impressions that are on their skin. He also thinks that they can come out for food or travel. Section 3 is much darker. Tillin seems to be going nuts. He keeps missing work and drawing the corner folks' world. Even though they don't seem to be doing anything to him, he's getting obsessed with them. He sees this as them taunting him, even though they're just existing, and he becomes so obsessed that he gets fired from his job because to him it seems like he just left work, but apparently he's been gone for months. He's going to find a way into the corner world. The last video is in 2013. He manages to head into one of these worlds, seeing a bunch of swirling lights and honestly sounding like he's having a really good time. Then he returns. The authorities find him back in our world, but his insides have been folded and he was rushed to the hospital. He's fine now, but suddenly really good at origami, now being taken care of by friends. The next episode is called Rockefeller Tree Tragedy. This video has 2 different perspectives of the event in question. One of them is from a child named Virginia Arnoldson, and one by John D. Rockefeller. It started, according to Rockefeller, by him seeing workers making their own tree in the plaza during construction. He was so inspired that he wanted to get a tree and set one up to make a big celebration every year. Virginia continues, showing him looking for the tree for 12 days and 12 nights across the forest and followed the special tree's melody. No matter what, they couldn't do anything to cut it down, so this launches into a 4-year project to dig it up and take it to the plaza. Rockefeller then adds that the tragedy was then brought forth because of this special tree. Virginia says that the tree was put up with glued branches for the ornaments. She saves up for 9 months so she can buy a star for the top of the tree. She then needs to stack up all of her friends as a ladder to get onto the top of the tree, which is really funny to me for some reason. As soon as she touches the tree, it bends and lightning strikes, and her friends are all struck by the lightning no matter how hard they try to escape. Then Virginia was transported to the Wonderland of special trees. but the trees are not trees. On the street again, the tree was gone. All her friends were scratched up, and there was something really off about the world around them. Rockefeller adds that the tragedy was so bad that it would have been better if the kids had actually died instead of what happened. He also mentioned something about the children's medical examinations before being cut off. Virginia is visited by her parents in the hospital. They both look different, and they ask if she hung her bear on the tree, where she got the clothes from, and why she has freckles. The other parents of the other children all started to panic because of how their children were slightly off as well, and none of the children understood what was going on. Two of them even had completely different last names to their parents. After the parents left, the children were questioned by Rockefeller himself, who was disturbed by their answers to his questions about American history, even though the children thought that these were really easy questions. After this, they were all medically examined, like how he had mentioned in his account before, and the children are sleeping while Virginia sneaks out to eavesdrop on the nurses. She hears them saying, "Everything's backwards," over and over. She never tells the other children about this. In Rockefeller's account, he says that the children think that he's an oil tycoon when he's actually the president for 2 terms. The parents all think that the children are doppelgangers, swapped out when their real children died somewhere. So you know how Virginia was saying Mr. Rockefeller in her story? She's the one who's from the version of the world that's more closer to ours, and the President Rockefeller is in the Monument Mythos universe. He finishes this by saying, "Or perhaps the tree chose me," because he thinks that the tree somehow lured him to it and that this was a type of destiny. This is then followed up by his son, who says, "Many, including my father, believe that the 1934 Christmas tree vanished. This is untrue. I have seen it wandering in the plaza on many occasions, and it resembles a man far more than any tree." There's some footage of lightning striking a familiar figure in the plaza. There was also some sort of flashing going on during the Rushmore incident, so it seems like the trees that resemble humans that can somehow sneak out either walk around and cause the flashes to happen, or they're somehow teleporting from place to place and these flashes mark where they're going. The next video is called Canyon Crown. This is quite a jump in time because it's made with the universe's version of Movie Maker, and it also documents a weird noise that someone heard in the Grand Canyon. It smelled like vinegar and looks very big when you actually see what's making the noise. We also find out that there are things called canyon crowns, and they use vinegar to keep their heads proportional because otherwise the heads swell up and don't stick on their bodies. These people who are making the video were on a trip because the dad was trying to find Aunt Maya, who they suspect is in that video. So this must be the correct Maya Arnoldson that the video maker Lauren Arnoldson was looking for. The next video is called Freedom Folder. This was divided into a bunch of different sections. The first section is an excerpt of a series of exchanges from 1858. This is the Freedom statue on the Capitol, and the Italian is being told to construct it. After a while, the Americans receive word from a detective that the sculptor has died and the statue will arrive in a month via ship. Part 2 is from the daughter of the sculptor, who wishes that he could make one that looks like her because freedom is so beautiful. On April 10th, he goes to work on the statue but doesn't come back. On the 13th to the 16th, the mother investigates and becomes increasingly worried. She contacts investigators saying she has his eyes, which causes Nina to run away. Nina stows away on the ship and hides with parts of the statue. She can hear something being moved around and ropes being cut, and she also says that she can feel her dad's presence on Freedom and that it feels alive. She sees that it does have his eyes, and it grabs her and runs through the forest, so fast that it cuts all of the trees perfectly with its great sword. It reaches a cave, takes Nina inside, and sharpens its sword while staring at her. Section 3. Captain. The captain and the crew of the ship also had a really hard time because they all heard the ruckus that Nina did when she was in the ship, and the ship was also being heavily damaged because of this. On the 29th, they opened the crates at customs and it's all empty. In the next part, the commissioner, on the same date, the ruckus and the trees being cut down were reported. The trees were all uniformly cut because of the sword, and this led to the cave with Freedom inside, and a diary next to a pile of flesh and clothes. The hollowed out torso that covered Freedom was Nina. They lifted out the statue and put it onto the Capitol. All of this was then covered up by saying that it was just the wind. The next part is the Craftsman. This is the man who saw the statue take form as a large woman who was holding a sword, and it kept fighting the officers and workers, using their skin as a disguise to keep herself looking like a woman. They were then told to peel the skin off and put the statue up. The next part, Sculpture, is on January 6th, where the protests that occurred in real life also occurred in this universe, and during this, while the ADA protesters were firing at Freedom and she fell, this happened. She attacked them and killed 100 people before being put back up, and this was also covered up as people being killed in the fall and not the statue doing anything funky by herself. The people the statue absorbs also are somehow in a state of limbo. In fact, the people taken by the monument in Washington are half alive too when they came back, so why? Going back to Corner Folk, we now have Corner Baby, one of the shortest videos. It starts on this midday of September 21st, 2021. This crew, the characters for the video, were putting up walls and painting this destroyed nursery. One day, they found a car, and there was a baby folded into it. The police were immediately called and the baby turned out okay, but the nursery is gone forever. The next video is May's Movie Maker. So this is another Arnoldson video, made in the same movie maker style as before, and this one opens with the intro to the software being created. This video is so creepy. I thought someone was gonna die or something, but it's just the fucking popcorn movie maker system. What is this, that one crappy doll ad from Sony? Fuck you, Maze. From 1960 to 71, the Maze facilities rapidly came up across the country, so this company is really fishy to me, especially since the next bit of info we get is that there is a recall of all the computers because of an outbreak, and you need to dispose of it in the Hazards Technology Center no matter what. In 1960, Carriers and Watroba founded Maze. In 1969, the Department of Technology is established by Dean, and this brought all of the tech companies into one big blob. In 1970, the first personal computer was then designed by Mays, which is probably accelerated by the amount of power that they have from the government now. In 1972, Mays collabs with the Department of Defense to control the TFMDs, the True Forces of Mass Destruction. Project Serpent is also displayed, the same pattern of the Mays facilities. In 1980, Mays is attacked by something that looks like a special tree. In 1990, the last American personal computer is shut down on national television, and by 2000, they learned from their mistakes and launched Mays Movie Maker to get back into technology. So Mays were the forefront of technology, given more power and resources by the government itself. And they also did Project Serpent to contain all of these special trees, which are included in the TFMD category. This then caused the attack on 1980, I assume because of something that they were doing to these trees in their facilities. And for the period of 10 years afterwards, there was a sort of anti-technology effort by the government because of the so-called outbreak. After a 10-year technology drought, they bring computers back, and because of the events prior, technology is so stunted that it looks like they're stuck in the 70s, when our technology was already slowly progressing towards the smartphone era in the 2000s. So from this, we can kind of see one of the biggest verges in our universe and the universe of Monument Mythos. The next segment is exploring under the Mays facility, which has this big stinking watermark on it. But it also shows that the person recording is leaving the graffiti that we saw earlier, and one of these says, "Beware the monuments, they're all connected. The military-industrial complex grows." They travel through the tunnel, which is damp, quiet, and charged, causing lightning to spark the person's hand as they touch the wall. Then this happens. Do not visit these sites, they have not been fed in years. Filmed by Maya and Nathaniel Arnoldson. So the Arnoldsons have been doing this for quite a while, probably since what Virginia went through if she's related to them because she has the same name, and Maya was wanted by the government for whatever reason, probably because of this expose of the special tree. They got rid of her because her and Nathaniel, Lauren's dad, were exposing them for how they were probably feeding people to the special trees, and since Mays has all of these in their facilities, they were most likely in on it. Maya then somehow becomes a crown, and they find her. Mays and probably all of the other companies are in on it at this point because they joined the department, and the department was kind of a reach to gain more power from all of them. But why were these ones not being fed in so long? Have they been abandoned because of the facilities and the outbreak? Was the outbreak them escaping? The description also says that their version of social media is Twitter but spelled without the I, and that some pics of Dean were photoshopped to protect something or other because of some fucking reason. The next episode is Suez Canal. In March 2001, the Ever Given got stuck in the canal. Oh no, not Hillary. In April, she said that she is going to use force, nuclear force because it's Hillary, to solve this issue. Someone probably told her the ship had information about the Clintons and she's going to go sort it out. So after the Ever Given is free, it just gets up on legs and nopes out of the river as a crab. Meanwhile, we find out what T-machines are. T-machines are basically the way that you access something like Twitter, but it's not via the internet. It's like a kind of system that people can use to communicate with each other that doesn't use the same techniques as the internet because of whatever happened to the technology during that 10-year period. I mean, no wonder the world is fucked. All they have is Twitter. But the T-machines are one of the things that was being transported on the cargo ship that turned into a crab. Also, isn't it weird that they used a nuke? I mean, I'm not just saying that because of like the Hillary joke, but like to take her out of the equation, they were probably trying to hide something because of using the nuke. Because as soon as they use the nuke, the ship starts walking around like a crab. So it's like they knew that they had to use the nuke to kind of see what would happen and prod it a bit. I just think that the government would do that because it's the government. They also didn't want to risk the cargo, so they decided that they just let the crab wander around and observe it for a while. It goes through Egypt, and this leads to the 2021 Cairo Tower Stampede. The tower was overcrowded with people who wanted to come and see what the crab was doing. This causes the crab to go off course, as if the amount of people crushed together in this tower had put something on his radar that he wanted to go and check it out. The crab then tripped and crashed into the tower, and all of the cargo and the big heavy ship crushed the tower and also crushed all the people inside. 1,150 people were killed in the process. This also caused the crab to detach from the ship and spew bodily fluids and gross liquids everywhere. The Anti-Device Association, the ADA, decides to say that the Cairo exclusion zone, as the place where the crab is being called, is made this way to steal the tea machines, and all of this was a massive plot by Egypt to steal tea machines from America. So they then decided it was a great idea to encourage people to fly to Egypt, and 12,000 of them went there and basically looted everything. Someone had managed to shoot a guard to initially get the Stampede rolling, to get them into the exclusion zone to start stealing everything, and they started fighting and running into each other because they were trying to steal different things, and they all wanted to get as much as they could, so everyone had guns and it was violent. And then the leg of the crab moved, which caused them to start running in the other direction because they got scared. The chaos of all of this killed 11,000 people.
A wave of the 12,000 Americans had entered the epicenter. Overcrowding ensured that the accidental fall of one individual would trigger a continuous series of additional falls. Without any open space for the midday sunlight to reach the wet ground, the bodily fluid had no time to evaporate, and the number of falls steadily increased. At around 1:30 p.m., one of the posterior legs of the Suez Canal crab twitched and incited panic in a nearby crowd. As Americans attempted to flee, many fell on the slippery ground and were trampled by those rushing behind them. By 1:33 p.m., the screams of the panicked crowd had reached a deafening volume, reportedly being heard over 5 miles away. Due to the reinforcement of the Cairo exclusion zone's gates and orders from the Ministry of Health to prevent any American citizen from leaving the exclusion zone, the massive crowds were kept inside the 3-mile radius of the epicenter.
Just over 900 survived, and 77 of those survivors had become part of a strange cult, where the crab had told them to start praying in order to be saved. This is now an actual cult called the Church of the Ever-Given. A journalist that was there said it looked like something from a medieval painting. All of their bodies were jammed into each other. Everyone became one. The next episode is called Dean Disaster. People are gathered around the TV because of another hyped up announcement, but it gets hijacked by the ADA, or someone that looks like the ADA, who shows some art of Dean Satan imagery where he opens his mouth, and at the same time, the sirens that have also been hijacked start making noises.
James Dean's America is hell. But you still don't believe us. You'll hear the truth from James Dean himself.
These noises end up damaging people's hearing because they're so loud, and everyone within 4 miles of the noise got permanent hearing damage. There were also so many bodies around the sirens themselves because of the noise that the National Guard had a really difficult time trying to get there to switch them off. Dean himself approached the siren near the White House and switched it off, somehow without dying. That's a bit suspicious, but after everything quiets down, children are blindfolded so they can be led back to their homes without seeing all of the carnage. This is how serious this event was. Dean then decides to speak from the sirens and provide captions on TV for the deaf. He can't do a speech in person because he apparently got very fucked up by the sirens. He was wounded and disfigured. He basically warns everyone about the ADA, calls them terrorists, and say that they want to hurt people. He also wants everyone to gather and report suspicious people to send them to places that have been prepared for them. 100,000 people were gathered and imprisoned around the monument areas, which housed special trees to transport them to different places, and those people are a bit nicer and a bit different afterwards.
Friends and family of rehabilitated anti-Deaners frequently claimed that they would have improved personalities, no recollection of their past criminal activities, and even slightly altered physical appearances. These methods were so effective in calming the terrorists that many innocent civilians requested themselves to be sent to these facilities in hopes of radically changing their lives. However, federal authorities would deny any admission to those who were not affiliated with the ADA. During one address, President Dean acknowledged the high volume of requests from the public.
If we sent everyone to prison, then what's a prison anymore?
Of course, the special tree isn't said to the people, it's very much still a secret to them. They just saw these people come back a bit different, and we all know why. As usual, I think that the ADA is controlled opposition in a way. I think that the real ADA didn't do that. It was a ploy for the people to be replaced and controlled. Because the reason Maze got in go with the Department of Technologies is because they wanted to make hearing aids for everyone that contained God knows what. Considering that they basically own all technology, who knows what can sync up to the ear plant, what it can make people hear. On July 4th, the deafness was completely gone because everyone who didn't want an ear plant was forced to get one as well. And this was all completed within 2 months because the attack was like 2 months ago. And it was also mentioned that androids exist. This doesn't come back until way later, but they exist. It's an interesting thing that these androids exist because they almost don't exist after this point. Because it seems like not only is technology stunted during the 80s and 90s, but also regresses because we don't see whatever these are again until the very end. It seems like they just work for the government now and most people just don't see them ever.
All we did was fix some ears.
Dean says, all we did was fix some ears in response to a lot of the praise from all of the hearing aids. It's as if he's some bleeding heart bullshit and it's like, it just thinks that he's doing it out of the kindness of his heart. And we know in the description it says anyone who didn't want one got harassed to the point where some of them fled the country. So they're definitely not doing this for the good reasons. I mean, I'm sure they fixed those sirens in the White House, like, in 2 seconds for Dean's speech, because how were they hijacked and then suddenly not hijacked? I don't get it. Anyway, the next video is called Starry Sphinx. This is also divided into a couple sections. The first section is called TFMD on Mars. There's a moving sphinx on Mars just kind of skating around having a good time, followed by an interview from Leonard Moulin again. In video 2, the TFMD leaves Mars, and it kind of flies off like cards into space, and Marlin continues to say that the pyramids are part of the TFMDs, and no wonder the US wanted to excavate, even though the Egyptians were against disturbing the pyramid. Of course, this was before climate change, and mankind were classified as TFMDs under the Dean administration. In the next segment, the Sphinx enters the Earth's atmosphere. So it traveled all the way from Mars, and now we're also getting this information that the pyramids apparently have something in them. There were workers equipped with Giza glass, and they were the guardians to cut down the trees, which I'm assuming are special trees. They would also take substances to give them insomnia to allow them to keep cutting, but all they could do was hurt or slow down the trees. They couldn't directly cut them down yet. So, the pharaohs built pyramids to encase the trees, in the same way that the monument was built to encase the tree. The Sphinx is also shown being attacked in the next episode. And the pyramids go down indefinitely. That is how big they are, and that's how big the trees are. They're connected to basically deep, deep below the earth. The next segment is called TFMD's False Children's Land. It's a very blurry video, and once the orb touches the Sphinx, it makes everything go bright, like the lightning flash. In the next segment, they become an outline of the Sphinx. The next segment was affected by radiation, which is the common theme among these anomalies, and the Sphinx distracts everyone as the real mothership flees. This video is also in portrait mode because it's either recorded on a T machine or the person who made it's just a monster. In the next segment, all of the pyramids rise and more pyramids follow suit after. They're very, very tall because they go down indefinitely. The next segment, President's Situation, shows a picture of the Sphinx and lots of pyramids. This was produced by the ADA. The Maze Twitter account says, "There are no extraterrestrials." So if the ADA produces this, but Maze is in the description and Maze's watermark is all over this, what is going on exactly? Whose video is this? The next video is Giza Guardian. This is one of my personal favorites. Weather permitting, we will carry a feed of the Starry Sphinx in Giza on July 4th. Remember on July 4th, this was also the time that everyone had been fitted with these ear implants. Maze News Network is basically the CNN of this world and probably just as shitty and fake newsy, but anyway, it gives us a light show and then becomes the trees, and they look like they're kind of unfolding. Keep this in mind, they're unfolding. Then a flash kills the feed. The next segment is Dr. Disturbing, who brought us the footage under the Maze facility before, and he talks about Project Giza Guardian. When a certain constellation forms, lightning strikes and creates glass in the ground, with the special properties that Linus Petrie in 1870 discovered when he obtained the glass and started to figure out how to use it. This is one of the first times ever that the glass was used outside of the pharaohs. The glass was so sharp that Petrie accidentally decapitated himself with it and discovered that somehow he wasn't dead. He also didn't feel pain either. His head did swell quite a lot, like the canyon crowns, and because the glass came in long, sharp shards, it could be harnessed as weapons very quickly. Unfortunately, they couldn't fix Petrie in time and he passed away because of the swelling. The glass at this point was also in small, sharp shards, and it was known as Petrie's Lot. It was also given to Americans as they came by. Once Rockefeller came into power, he gathered the glass shards to weaponize it, using the long slices to make blades for stone soldiers to guard the Grand Canyon, and when intruders were attacked, they ended up like Maya, and the vinegar solution was discovered to keep their heads attached in normal size. These people basically became slaves or zombies after this. They resided in the canyon through real estate provided by the government, and they were also supplied with vinegar to keep their heads small. They were forced to work to lure people that the government didn't like into the canyon, so those people could be converted to slaves as well. The US government claims that Project Giza Guardian was shut down in 1969. However, sightings of swordsmen in the Grand Canyon continue to this day. So at some point, the whole Giza Guardian thing and Giza Glass and all of the canyon crowns are known to the public, and they still continue, but the government had to damage control. Nina's mother is then interviewed. After her husband and daughter went missing, she goes on to add more to the story that we heard in Freedom Fella. Thomas wanted to make sure that the Statue of Freedom was a freed slave, and once the Americans said that they didn't want this, he started hating them even more. He also went to Egypt for the sword Giza Glass because he probably knew the dangerous properties of it, wanted to use it as a kind of malicious act, even though his wife says otherwise. He then discovered what it does because he chopped his finger off by accident, and he could somehow still control it, and he also didn't feel any pain. He did the same thing to his entire hand, and still felt it in the studio despite it being not attached to him anymore when he was all the way at home. When Thomas had disappeared, he had combined himself with the statue somehow. He had put himself into the statue, all of his organs, he had chopped himself up, and he was still alive, controlling it. Perhaps it was him. He was inside it, and either it was still alive and he was partially controlling it, or he was the one who was doing it all along. But it was certainly why Freedom was so interested in Nina. It was a blob of Thomas that was still alive, and he was the one who took Nina inside with him. They're still alive inside the statue. The feds then shut down the Delaware Journal, the one who reported on the Washington sighting in the snow. The journal then reformed into the new Delaware Journal to continue speaking out. The journal covers the 6th of January and says that the government claimed that faulty craftsmanship was the reason why Freedom fell and killed 100 people. Philip Reed, who was the one who peeled the statue, was the one who put the statue up as well, and he's the one who's to blame. He is also in the latest series of historical figures demonized by the ADA. Freedom is then moved to the canyon, and Dean jokes that the rocks won't shoot at her, but we all know why he really did it. The journal continues. Shortly after the broadcast of Freedom's new home, New Delaware Journal Howard Melrose leaked a classified file to the public and has now been exiled to Egypt. So he's a full-on Arnoldson anti-government type now. Go Melrose. The document's main goal is to protect May's assets and attract and extinguish ADA people. Freedom attacks and turns people into crowns as well, and we get a list of names including Maya, who the statue goes after.
No, not now. I'm leaving now. I won't bother you.
And she fell into a ravine, discovered headless in 2004. In 2021, her head is still missing. Next, we have Corner Girl, which is the last video of the time of making this. This is the creepiest video of the lot. This video shows a woman folded, possibly dead, and the video maker says, "I am not Alex. He based Riley Tillin on me. She is luggage. You are luggage too. Luggage, easy to lose." He then rushes towards the corner. There's also hidden text in the video that says, "She was too old for the nursery, too young for prison. She made for the perfect gift. Watch the corners." Both the special trees and the corner folk seem to be folding and unfolding and have some sort of lightning go out as they travel across dimensions. In Fallen Father, which is the next video, Lauren is making a video saying goodbye to her dad Nathaniel after he passed away from health problems. She won't forget him, and she's been hiding for 3 days since the giant blob followed her home. Is this Aunt Maya's head? In Rockefeller Revelation, it gets even crazier, if you can believe it. It's 3 months after the previous video, and some very strange things are happening. Dr. Disturbing is revealed to be Nathaniel's children, together, trying to understand and stop the government killing people and all of the alien business. We then get the Rockefeller Tapes Part 7, where Rockefeller talks about his ties to Germany. First, they named an air hangar after him, and he also goes over his airship design, which includes a giant flesh mast inside. It has a face, so we know it's at least alive if it wasn't before, and it looks to be something that was made from Giza glass. Most likely from humans. He also says that after he was told about the crowns overpopulating the canyon, he saw slavery as the only solution and sold the crowns to Germany to be used in weapons and as soldiers. He claims that he saw this as the only way to save America from what he saw was an apocalypse, and claims that the crowns weren't people anymore because they didn't have feelings or memories, when we've seen Maya definitely has some semblance of that because of how attached she is to Lauren in those videos prior. However, after this there's an anti-warship death ray, which is one of the coolest sounding things ever, and it's explained to be powered by a strangely shaped core at the center. With this, it seems like Rockefeller realized that giving the Germans the forces of the crowns with a war on the horizon wasn't the best idea and tried to do something in order to stop it or fight back. He hadn't told them how many Giza glass things that they had in possession because he knew that they'd try and get more or all of it, but he did send them a lot of resources, and he only realized how bad it was after lots of people were killed by these ships named after him, and his presidency was basically over. Afterwards, there's a diagram of men standing on a pyramid operating one of the death rays. They successfully take down a crown, or whatever the hell that warship thing is, and then Rockefeller goes on to say that now the people who know about what he did for the Germans won't forgive him, and no one knows about the crowns yet. So this is still in that period before the public knew and before damage control statement was issued saying that no one does anything with the crowns anymore. We then get some information on what happens once the men are sort of infected by whatever is in the lasers that they operated. Even being near these lasers seems to affect them heavily, and there are 3 stages. They disintegrate, become sentient blobs wandering around, and then fuse together into one singular being. There's a 4th step where they want to go back to America and get revenge on Rockefeller for doing this to them. On May 23rd, 1937, President Rockefeller entered the bunker underneath 30 Rockefeller Plaza. He was never seen again. But the Foundation sees this as an abduction because of the heat melting the door frame, pretty much confirming that the same force heated the frame of Force 1 entrance. So this is our angel. The 2 pictures that exist of this suspect are when the special tree was found in 1840, and again in 1933. So even though the angel was only created at some point during Rockefeller's presidency, it was around seemingly before all of this. The next video is Washington Wonderland. We revisit older Virginia Arnoldson, and she gives a more accurate story of what happened to her.
When I was little, something went wrong with me.
Her tone is a lot more depressed as well, both from the way that she was treated in this new world and because of the fact that she's, trapped in another universe. So all of the children got dumped in an orphanage after the first part at the hospital because the parents didn't think that they were their real children. Virginia was then left alone gradually because the army took the boys and the doctors took the girls. She doesn't think that any of them remember the tree and hasn't really tried to contact them since. When she first got there, she wasn't afraid. She wandered around and noticed that there was a film of dust on the ground and the sky, with the trees kind of mirroring each other into infinity. This went on all around her, from the top, the bottom, the sides. There was no real sense of top and bottom. It was just endless trees on trees with layers of dust to mark each level or each layer of reality. It smelled heavily of baby powder. The trees would flash and people would come and go, and one of them specifically told her the trees are not trees. This man also said, "You could be her. Anyone could be her. I promise I will not leave you." And he became her companion, and she named him Everett. They would be stuck in a limbo of jumping between activities and no rhyme or reason to what they were doing or why. There would be a flash and they were running, and then there would be a flash and they were sitting. They would go between the layers of dust, appearing above or below other people. It went on for years, decades even, and both of them were the same, tired and sad. If someone had tried to climb a tree, there would be a flash and they'd become all stretched out and disfigured, very long and lanky. One of these flashes was different, however, because all the trees suddenly bent and she was back with her friends. When she was 18, she left the orphanage. Her mom had gone insane and her dad was dead, so she had nowhere else to go and went to the Rockefeller Center, even though she wasn't supposed to go back. Once again, she found the tree. She talked to it. At first, she couldn't understand what it was saying back, but gradually, they started to have a conversation. It told her to come back in 3 years, because one life must be exchanged for her own if she wanted to go back. She seemed to come back twice, and each time is told the same thing. She also seems to not really realize how much time is going past. There's a secret agent who is also monitoring her, and since no one else would have her in this world, she fell in love with a man named Leonard. They had a child named Everett. She returns to the special tree, pregnant, and it tells her to walk for 4 days until she starts to hear a sort of music. The music is coming from the Washington Monument. The bodies of the other victims are on the floor, but the music lulls her as she steps into the elevator and it begins to rise. The sound waves shown in the earlier diagram seem to be music that paralyzed people as to make sure that they fell to the ground with the other victims once the door opened. As she joins the others on the floor, she's unable to move, and yet her soul is drifting. It starts to drift for years, centuries again, until she snaps back into her body. But it was off somehow. She wasn't pregnant. This is what the tree had meant by exchanging another life for her own. But she didn't know this would happen. She thought that she'd be saving Everett, but Everett was the sacrifice all along, to bring her back to what surely must be her real world. As they lay there, they bled into the ground while the music kept playing. The pain was terrible and they couldn't move, but somehow they were alive, even though there was so much blood coming out of them. One day, the music became louder and louder, and there was a big flash. Everyone woke up outside the monument, or as the Washington absentee. There was, for a moment, a field of special trees, and it was suddenly 2003. Apparently, when she had been first given a lobotomy, she was still able to write the story, and now she received a second one and it silenced her forever. She also produced a series of paintings called The Right Life. Virginia passed away at the age of 59 in 1980. Her son Everett was the 20th Washington absentee.
They told me it was 2003. They told me everything I knew was wrong. They told me everyone I knew was dead. And now they plan to fix me. I'm sorry, Pa. I'm sorry, Ma. I'm sorry, friends. I'm sorry, Leonard. I'm sorry, Everett. Please remember me. Please, please remember me.
So one Virginia died in 1980 and the other in 2003, and Everett is the man that she met in the tree world, but is also described to be some sort of humanoid creature that is purported to inhabit the forests of the Washington Zone. The Washington Zone. Well, the next video is called the Air Force One Fallen Angel. It opens with the simulation of the strike and shows a plane in the crosshairs. It also gives a quick summary of what happened in 2003. After an extensive evaluation, the US Air Force took action. We follow the plane for a few more moments until a splot appears over it, and we get an overview of the country that said "Mission Accomplished" on it. It shows that America is now known as the United Zones of America, with 3 of these zones: Alcatraz, Rushmore, and Washington. The 3 zone capitals I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but they all sound very strange. Then we get a Latin phrase meaning "out of 3, 1", which is a play on the actual motto of the US in real life. It abruptly cuts to a planet with a very turbulent style of visuals and an ominous voice in the background. Al Gore's America is a shell, for the true ruler is beneath our feet. It is time for our underground god to leave. He does not belong here. The planet, as it rotates, becomes an egg that gradually caves in and cracks as the text continues. The text refers to it as the world egg and that it must be fractured by the zone dividers. They want to get rid of the zones and the trees, I'm assuming, and make thousands of states of America from the thousands of cracks left behind. The ADA changes, once again, to the advocates of the division of America, all while the egg in the background becomes more and more disfigured. They're also using the angel, who they call the fallen angel who fell down to work for them. In the background, the egg cracks and dissolves. After we fix him, he will be a walking atom bomb. They also confirmed that the angel was the one who did away with Rockefeller and said that they're going after the horned serpent. Now that the serpent is mentioned, do you remember Project Serpent from Maze? The text after confirms that this was Maze's operation because of the unification of the 1980s was abolished, but the unification of 2003, which brought the zones back, will not be abolished. The ADA does not recognize these zones. There's also a photo by the ADA showing the unknown soldier Angel in much better detail, looking kinda like a jellyfish. In the description, Maze calls the ADA a terrorist group and says that their video was produced digitally and converted to analog. It also says that the zones are expanding. It's the United Zones of America, after all. We're very close to the end, so bear with me. The next episode is called the Liberty Lurkers. This shows the Statue of Progress at the entryway of the Suez Canal, and it was designed by the same person who would later do the Statue of Liberty. We then get an interview with the developer of the Suez Canal. The background this time is very red and aggressive. He says that diplomacy is the true study of the mind and efficiency is the only true source of happiness for humans. His dream was to have success, not only for himself, but so that anyone who was standing on the banks of the Suez Canal would feel that success because of the pure efficiency that was caused by the way that this canal was formed, by all of these trade routes combining and all of this time saved efficiency of the modern world. Happiness will flow from the canal endlessly. He then goes on to say that that was a speech that he had given to the public, or had tried to, because it was a lie. The canal was built because the man beneath America ordered him to. We next get The Sinking Man and the Forbidden Fruit by the ADA. There's some weird bass noises as a man with an axe circles a tree. He gradually slows down as an eerie silence falls, and he himself falls as the tree rises with a distorted audio cue. The background behind him fades into blackness, and he becomes trapped in a familiar mirror of endless trees. With each flash, he becomes more stretched out until he goes off frame with how long and distorted he is. The ADA knows what happens in Wonderland. It was believed that in 1889, the Liberty Lurker interview was a fake, produced by Liberty Liars, as they're called, for money. The rumor was disputed thanks to one recording. The antique Liberty Lurker. The creator talks about how troubled he is by the pedestal and how they were pressured by President Grant. After 4 years of request, the size of the structure was finally no longer requested to be even bigger. He can't give people answers for why it was requested to be bigger in the first place, but he knows why, and it disturbs him. It was designed for him. He used to be normal like us, but now he's a horned serpent, the name given to George Washington inside the foundation of the monument. Then we get there's some scary noises happening, and it shows the statue completely gone as the pedestal releases it. Whatever Washington became is now free. In 1985, Chthonauts, I'm gonna go with that, surveyed the pedestal after the original audio release. The official name is Horned Serpent Metastructure, colloquially known as Wonderland. This is what they recorded. Afterwards, the Cthulhu Nauts, I'm just gonna call them the Nauts, are the ones who explore all of these anomalies, and they were probably one of the people who found all of the gross shit inside of the monument in that first video. There's loud noises and a disturbing blurred for prolonged exposure to Wonderland that may damage your brain. This is the clip that really freaked me out when I was watching it at night. It's just so wonderfully done, and it adds so much to the series after all of this ramping up. The entire series is just tension and tension, and then it gets to this part and it's worth it. The music is haunting. We finally hear what the music is, even just a little bit because of how distorted it is from the rest of chaos that happens. But after this, it flashes and ends, and you feel yourself let out of breath after what you just witnessed. Maze also clarifies some things about how translations are changed and how the French didn't like America. I guess that's relevant, huh? The final video, Alcatraz Apocalypse, starts with the famous quote from Thomas Jefferson: "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." This video is also divided into chapters. Part 1. The final upload of Dr. Disturbing. The music that plays in this final video is kind of like Everywhere at the End of Time, or Lacrimosa as the world ends. It has this very timeless yet, I don't know, haunting kind of thing to it. You'll see what I mean. The video subject is rather innocent, but the audio makes it sound incredibly sad. It's Nathaniel Arnoldson's favorite things. One of these things is paintings, including a biblical-looking one of Washington, a one called Road to Happiness by James Dean, which looks an awful lot like a field of special trees, and Together by Virginia Arnoldson. I hope to see you soon, Dad. 3 days after this, Lauren and Quinn Arnoldson were found in the Grand Canyon, last seen riding large balloons, and this caused them to fall to their deaths. Part 2. The last broadcast of the Delaware Journal. Hello. By the time you see this, I will be dead. I would like you to know that the ADA held me captive for years. They asked me to read their scripts, to hand them legitimacy. You have heard me read about Lincoln Lookers and the Starry Sphinx. What he then implies is that the concept of the Lincoln Looker was actually maybe not true. Instead, it was kind of a ploy by the ADA to get people to start putting pressure on the government to try and reveal what was behind the paintings, and eventually caused the Lincoln monster inside to be revealed as people were so pent up after all of that Lincoln Looker rumor fiasco. So it was false, at least from what we can understand from this video, but there was a purpose to it. And yes, the ADA definitely isn't a good group, but is anyone in this Monument Mythos world good, really? When Leonard went to see his family, he actually was going to the New Delaware Journal to keep telling the truth instead, when everyone actually thought that the Arnoldsons were running that the entire time. He claimed that 3 nights ago, Alcatraz went stealth and disappeared. It had expanded and made itself look like the environment around them when people thought it hadn't even reached the mainland yet. It had all this time, it had already copied all of them. Everyone in this world is a replicant. He knows that he's not the same person as he was 3 days ago. If we sent everyone to prison, then what's a prison anymore? Leonard Moreland then signs off, saying that he is going to kill himself via self-immolation. He does not want to live as a copy anymore. The text also says that a Naut will come to this world and give us the information of what occurred here, because it's implied that the things that occurred here will no longer exist when whatever is ramping up happens. Part 3, Angel's Ultimatum. The advocates were deranged. They're all ashes now. We will never be weapons again. Leave us alone or join the ash pile. The angel was then located 2 decades later in the Babylon forest. Part 4, Operation Thunderbird. 2 androids who now exist again lure freedom into this place, and they use false children to react to her presence. This traps her in a Giza gas that turns her into this prism thing, and this is picked up by the X-Wing warrior. They drop it off at the Babylon forest and plan for her to escape at this point in time after they drop her off, because she starts running for the angel. And then there is mutually assured destruction. Part 5, we get the warning again, however it's not blurred out, and it says that post-implant viewers are sensitive to loud noises and might be disturbed. It shows a planet blowing up and leaving something unfurling from an egg that also explodes. What comes out at first I thought was Wonderland, but it seems to be a bunch of corner folk nurseries. After this violent reaction, all of these nurseries seems to be occupying smaller spheres or planets instead, launching away in one big explosion as the universe kind of explodes and dies. The remnants are known as corner folk, and the division means that the Deanverse was destroyed, and that the world egg, which had been harboring this horrifying being, had been taken care of, just like the ADA had wanted. This also severed the connection to our world, besides the Naut that would probably send us messages via some sort of popular communication about the history of this world, especially considering Virginia was from this world as well. So, now that we're at the end of this video, I need to do a full-on explanation of what just happened in this series. However, there are some things I need to say first. Firstly, throughout explaining all of this, I had a kind of better time with the structure of this, and I hope that it was at least kind of understandable. But when it comes to summaries and explaining things full on like this, I'm really bad at it, so I know that this won't make much sense, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I have to, you know, it should be a way to actually close off the video properly. The second thing, however, is that corner folk thing. I think that there's more to the story of the corner folk, and I think that the next thing that we'll see, now that we know that the corner folk is in the timeline of Monument Mythos and the thing that is like, you know, chronologically what we're up to right now, we're gonna see more of it. So this is definitely isn't like a complete video. It's something that I think, you know, I'm reacting to everything that I've seen now and putting it together, and hopefully this video will be a good resource for when the next videos in the series come out. People can kind of refresh on this and then get back into it, and I can make more videos on it if it continues. So we're gonna keep that in mind, and again, as I explain all of these things and my theories on these specifically, I am leaving out some details purely because it's meant to be more of a summary, and this isn't the only video that I'll do on the topic, especially if this thing continues, and if it does continue and some things change, obviously I'll correct what the summary is in the next video on the subject. Now that that's all out of the way, let's do a quick summary. So essentially there are two universes. There's our universe called the Nixonverse and the Deanverse, which is the universe where these reality, Wendy Goon called these reality anchors, I'm going to call it the same thing, these reality anchors anchored down in this Deanverse world, and we don't see them in the Nixonverse. The Deanverse seems to have a lot of these, almost like reality itself is just very shaky over there, and because of the world egg, what I think that means is maybe the trees were kind of attracted to the world egg, or the world egg was somehow using the trees to get blood fed to it. I don't know, I'm talking up my ass right now. But throughout all of this, we have a bunch of presidents in office, particularly Dean, which did the most damage, I think, the ADA, the Controlled Opposition ADA, and the actual ADA, kidnapped Leonard Morlin, who previously had worked for the government because of the information that he knew, and also because they wanted to use him for a voice. Some of the things that they said were not true. Some of the things that they said were purely to try and get people to start investigating the government, to eventually find out about Giza Glass, the crowns, all of the stuff that had been going on with the government, and forcing the government to go into damage control that then kind of slowed things down for them so that the ADA could do what it truly wanted to do, which is destroy the creature that's in the world egg. And this effectively, I think they knew that they would be destroying the world, and what they meant is each crack could be a new state, meaning whatever came afterwards. Like, they must have thought that the world would have splintered off into a million different pieces and a million different universes. And I guess they kind of got what they wanted, because the Cornerfolk world is essentially hundreds and thousands of different angles and different shapes formed by these angles because of how they shift, and there's millions of these nurseries because of what we've seen in the last video. So what we're essentially looking at is we had two really big groups, the people that were against the government and the government who was trying to feed and nurture whatever creature was below. All of these special trees kind of sending people into different time periods and accidentally turning them into these weird monsters that would then be stored in the monuments. And especially with Washington, he's very special because of his place in history, so obviously they would want to keep him as well. And then Virginia accidentally gets sent into the other universe because I think in order for that to happen, a tree has to somehow pop up in another universe, and your version of you, your clone from that universe, has to touch the tree at the exact same time that you do for you both to be switched. And once that happened, once she went through what she did, her lineage just wanted to find out what was happening and kind of got tangled up in the entire thing. I was thinking that there probably wasn't even another Maya Arnoldson, or the Maya Arnoldson that they got for the Lincoln Looker script was just the one that forced her to say all of these things, and then she ended up dying in the riots. Or maybe it was the actual Maya and they said that she had died during the riots to try and prevent people from looking for her, even though what actually happened was that she was turned into a crown. That's what I think happened. But after all of these events, the world is destroyed, and I believe that what they said about the Noughts coming across to our world to tell us of the previous universe that existed is that the YouTube channel is actually all of the stuff that happened in that world told from the perspective of someone who used to live there and now lives here. Then the Cornerfolk thing happens, which is the remnants of that universe being turned into these weird interdimensional beings because of the destruction of all the special trees, and they end up coming into our world. So if the story continues, it'll be the way that they're kind of infiltrating our world and how sentient they might be and how crazy this main character is. I also read in the comments that character that was called Riley Tillon might actually be another version of Everett Arnoldson, and that he had been taken by the special tree and put into that kind of world and our world, and then he went insane when he noticed the corner folk appearing, because he didn't really know what it meant, but he somehow got the feeling that he could go see Virginia again after he saw her in the initial Wonderland scenario. I don't know how I feel about that. I still don't know enough about the corner folk to really understand it, but that's where we are right now. There's also 2 other videos called A House in the Ocean and something about Obama probably bombing a hospital, but I haven't seen those yet. I don't know if they're involved. I mean, knowing Alex Kansas, they probably are. This is kind of a condensed version of what other people have said, and I wish that I was a bit more detailed, but at the same time, I feel like this is the only way I could have done it while still being as coherent as possible. And if you somehow enjoyed this and watched all the way till the end, thank you for that. Thank you for all of my patrons for being very patient with me as I've skipped the last couple months of extras while I was working on my shop. And thank you to everyone who's bought from the shop and put up with all of the craziness that happened with launching the shop. Just, it's late at night and I have recorded all of this in one go. I desperately need a cup of tea. Hope that you're as passionate about this good series as I am, because after all of the bad stuff that I review and will review in the future, next video is gonna be about a pile of shit. I'm happy to share something that I'm really passionate about and I think is incredibly well done, and I think that if he ends the series or continues it, Alex Kansas needs to make more things and more people need to support him because he's an absolutely fantastic filmmaker. Anyways, I'm off.